Hi all, let's have a look at another fascinating high-level Blitz game. This is from the Altibox Norway tournament earlier in the year. Magnus Carlsen was playing against Anish Giri. We see an unusual first move from Magnus, knight c3. Black plays c5, so this could transpose now into a Sicilian defence if white plays e4. White played knight f3, so a very unusual start. Knight c6, but now e4, so we have a variation of the Sicilian defence. G6, we have bishop b5, so this looks pretty unusual though at the moment. Bishop g7. Usually here, well, Livebook's pretty confused actually. It's giving bishop c4 here. This doesn't look like a reasonable move in the position, but castling is mentioned or taking on c6. Let's see, black castles d6, rook e1. And now bishop d7 has been played a few times before in this particular position, it seems. This is played here to avoid double pawns. a4 to avoid black maybe playing a6 and b5 later. Rook c8, d3. White now has that bishop outside the pawn chain. Does he want to maintain it? We'll find out. Knight f6, knight d5. Black just castles, bishop g5. a6. Now Magnus doubles the pawns here. Bishop takes f6. You might think, hold on, isn't that a takes b5 as an option? Let's have a look here. Does black have to have double pawns? If he played a takes, bishop takes, and then a takes is just netting a pawn here. So yep, black is given double pawns. The bishop retreats back to c4. Then we have f5. This pawn is hit from that bishop. c3, f takes, undoubling the pawns. Knight a5 hitting the bishop. That's protected. Rook e8. The knight goes to e3. And now there is a slight threat of bishop takes f7 here if black's not careful. Just to give an example, this is just a token move. Bishop takes f7. Queen d5 check, and there's a big problem here. If king f8, knight g5 threatens mate, and if here, then knight takes h7 is checkmate. So that's a big problem for black to avoid this bishop f7. Bishop c6 handles that. It controls d5, puts pressure on e4. Bishop d5, queen b6, hitting b2, that's protected. Rook e7, rook a d1, rook c e8. White takes on c6. Now if knight takes, then knight d5 looks strong, forking queen and rook. So we have now an interesting situation. In fact, if queen takes, again knight d5 is still interesting, gaining a tempo. White stands slightly better here. So actually black took with b takes. He wants to swap d6 for e4. That happens. Exchange of prisoners, as Nimzovich sometimes says. Rook e d1. And now white might stand a little bit better in this position. And this knight is kind of useful. It's controlling c4. Yeah, white might want to proceed here with something like g3 or h3 actually, or knight d2 maybe, to hit the rook and try and get that c4 square. So perhaps this is the key, one of the key things which black was concerned about, this knight actually using that c4, because it's in front of the double pawns, right? So it looks logical, again reference to Nimzovich, it looks logical to blockade double pawns with a knight sometimes. So this is kind of trying to be discouraged with bishop h6, but there's a big snag here. There was a lurking tactical liability, and so often with Magnus Carlsen games it seems these lurking tactical liabilities, with the right configuration, they turn into major disaster areas. And in fact there is a slight disaster inherent in this move, a kind of weakness of the last move disaster. Can you see what square it's neglected and how you can pounce on that here if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video? So it was with good intention to perhaps try and stop the blockade on c4, but the implementation is not quite there with it to actually be plausible, because what does white play in this position? Okay, there's a pin on this pawn, and that previously wasn't a disaster, but here after knight d5 it is, because the knight is forking queen and f6, yeah, which the bishop's just gone away from. So the knight's a totally welcome visitor on f6, and it's with check. It's a total tactical disaster with one move. Black played queen b3. We have the check, and now knight takes, winning the exchange. And it's kind of easy after this. Taking there wins c6 because the knight is also creating a weakness of the last move there. And black's pawns are a wreck. And here after g3, giving some the king some air, rook d7, you can see that the rook's going to be doubled soon on f7. Black just resigned here. So that just shows, even in high level blitz, and I believe there is an increment, the fatality sometimes of just simply weaknesses of the last move is amazing. Yeah, you've got to check out for them. Whatever the high level idea is to stop a blockade or something, you've got to make sure your implementation is spot on, that you don't leave a fatal weakness of the last move. I think that's the big lesson for this game. Hope you got something from it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.